trying to get at is in your day-to-day life, there are certain, I suppose, ways of thinking or practices.
So I'll give you an example. Lashon hara.
That you like, that you appreciate, that give you real-world value.
There's a concept called Lashon hara, which is you can't speak evil of other people.
Okay.
And so every single Jew that I know, unless it's a bit of an exaggeration, but myself doesn't gossip. They try not to speak ill of other people. They try their best to think before they speak when it comes to embarrassing other people. Judaism teaches that embarrassing somebody is almost like it's akin to murdering them because the damage that you do.
I can see that. Yeah.
And so there's a very
murdered their reputation.
I've seen that in a video in a thing over there today.
Yeah. A couple of questions. You know, you're talking about the whole world, and Jewish people are the most generous in the whole world.
No, I didn't say Jews are the most generous, but I just said that amongst the biggest philanthropists are Jews. You'll also find Muslims in there, and it tends to be religious people more than atheists give philanthropy.
I mean, I think most studies show that religious people.
Point was also similar to Jewish and Christian and Muslim people as well, right? It wasn't just
No, absolutely.
I mean, there's sociological data which backs up the idea that religious people donate more to charity than non-religious.
Yes. So I'm trying to get to this is if, let's say for example, before you went to Judaism, is there a qualitative difference between your life then and your life now in terms of what you gain from the subscription to the belief?
My life is more stable. I've got a better job. I have hopefully a very happy marriage. Hopefully my wife agrees with this as she watches it.
Just like fun.
She'll be the one screaming in the comments. It's brought real stability and personal growth, and I would imagine you'll find that mirrored in most religious communities. I'll give you an example. When I first moved to London, I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
Every single weekend, a stranger would invite me, a Jewish person would invite me to eat with them on the Sabbath. I come from a working class village in the north of England. I'd never experienced kindness like that. Sikhs do the same. I'm sure it's the same within the Muslim community, but there are real concrete examples of where people's lives are enriched personally.
Community connection.
Yeah. So we have a system. It's something that's called the Gemach system.
Yes.
So, for example, when I got married, we were able to. There are people who will have in their house. They'll have 100 wine glasses that they'll make available. They'll go out and they'll buy them, and they'll make available, and they'll say, okay, I'll charge you maybe £50 deposit. They'll deliver them to the venue, and obviously, if you break something, you have to pay for the breakages. But they'll loan them to you.
Right. Okay.
The same with.
I've got a friend I've got a friend of mine. He's more affluent than me, and he decided to buy a Jaguar so that when people got married they'd have a nice car to go to the wedding. And so he's got some money, you're thinking. He drives it personally. He puts on the chauffeur cap and he drives them in his Jaguar, which he's only got for weddings. So these are examples.
Okay, I understand. So can I ask a different type of question then?
Please.
So let's say, because it's a religion and it's talking about God and prophets and afterlife and such things like this, so I would say it's intrinsically linked to the existential questions that humans like to ask themselves. So does this belief system help you with those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's actually a book, it's not written by me, but it's a book called God, Man and Nietzsche.
God, Man and Nietzsche?
Yeah. It's by, I've forgotten the name of the author. He's a philosophy lecturer at Yeshiva University in New York.
Oh, right.
And he explores where all the themes of contemporary Western philosophy occurred in Jewish sources. So, for example, there was how long was it? It was a 2-year debate in the Sanhedrin, which was the Jewish parliament before the fall of the previous Jewish state 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they had a 2-year debate on whether it was better to be born or not to be born.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
And in the end, they
legitimate question.
In the end, they concluded it would be better not to be born, but since we're born, we have to make the most of it.
I would say it's better to be born. Yeah. But anyway, in any case, so what about yourself? About existential questions to do with life and death and who we are and what we are. Before you came to Judaism, you maybe asked these questions, I imagine, and it gave you answers to it?
Yes, but on a surface level. So I think like most people, I was spoon-fed what Christianity was, and I was spoon-fed what atheism was, and there was a very, very surface level understanding.
Okay.
So most Orthodox Jews, as an example, subscribe to the Big Bang Theory, they subscribe to evolution. Obviously, within any religious community, there's dissenting opinions.
Yeah,
but the mainstream believe in science.
Okay.
But from my very basic understanding was if you were religious, you can't really believe in science because the two aren't compatible, because that's what I was taught at school and that's what was taught from my parents. And so I think when you start questioning, like, and you've come from a different, I believe, are you atheist or agnostic? Or?
I prefer no labels,
No
but
label,
the clearest one would be agnostic, as I think it's the most honest position.
Yeah.
But
So
whatever.
And so I would imagine, although you're agnostic, you've probably done an awful lot of reading because you're asking these questions, reading around this area from a religious to an atheist, and explored these big questions.
I try to read as much as I
Most
can.
people don't. Most people, in my experience, they will tell you that religion is is responsible for all the problems in the world, and obviously evolution happened and the Big Bang happened. And the minute you start scratching that and ask them to explain, well, what is the Big Bang Theory? They fall apart, and it's as much a leap of faith as it is for a religious
If you're
person.
not knowledgeable about it.
And I think the only difference, obviously if you're not knowledgeable, I think the only difference between
But there's very few people who are knowledgeable of both sides. There's only probably a handful of people in the world who are equally knowledgeable in matters of religion and science.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I would
most-
say
and-
spirituality, matters of spirituality. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? What does spirituality mean?
For me, it would mean to have some sort of, not imagination, a sort of conception of other possibilities than what we can directly perceive. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
The possibilities of higher beings, of afterlives, of other realms of existence. For me, this is an idea of spirituality. That's how I use the word personally. And I would say religions maybe can be a formalized way of looking at a certain way of understanding spirituality. I'm not disrespecting religions. I'm saying that's my understanding of it. There we go. So, one more question, and that's my kind of thing done. I mean, if our people want to talk, no boys, and if you want to continue talking, is what's the most, if you could say, what's the most valuable thing you get about your spiritual belief? What's its most enriching aspect for you personally?
So I can give it in someone else's words rather than my own. So the story of Hillel. And somebody came to one of our rabbis and said, if you can teach me everything about Judaism while I'm standing on one leg, I'll convert and become a Jew. If you can teach me the entire Torah. Well, and the rabbi responded, treat others as you wish to be treated. The rest is a commentary on that. And I think for me, that really is it. When it comes down to it, there are some religions that focus very much on the world to come. If you do X, Y, and Z, you'll be rewarded in the afterlife.
Right.
Judaism is actually, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll make this world a better place. And the focus is on what we call Olam Hazeh, which is making this world a better place.
I see. Okay, and that makes sense. If that's the most valuable thing, that's good. Oh, cool. Well, I'll conclude my chat there. It's sound. Thanks, man. Thanks to you also. Let's remove this awkwardly. There we go.
What's your YouTube channel?
It's
Lessons-
a good channel here.
Lessons for Life, 24/7.
And then this one's COE.
Oh yeah, got a shout out. To
Yeah, you got our ears.
It's the best part, yeah, for real.
Right.
Anyone? Well, Joseph, you're probably running out of.
No, I can talk about anything. Israel, Palestine,
can
Jeremy
go for
Corbyn. Happy marriage.
You want a mic?
Just a question, just a concept, I suppose. In your opinion, Judaism is the truth?
It is a truth.
A truth. So there are other truths around that.
It focuses on one very specific set of criteria for a tiny little tribe in the desert. So Judaism is focused on Jews. There's 15 million Jews in the world? There used to be a lot less when we received the Torah. And so it's a way for this one particular desert tribe to live. There can be many other truths out there for other peoples and how they can construct their societies and build their societies. We're not a proselytizing religion, so it's our truth.
I'll come back to
there
what I
is.
wanted to ask.
Can I clarify something there? Where maybe we'll slightly not disagree, but I think compliments.
I'm not winning.
Where we have most of what Joe said is correct. I wouldn't disagree with him, but there's but which obviously I say everything before the but doesn't count. We believe that there's a component of our religion which is applicable to everybody. There's something called the 7 Noahide laws, and they're applicable to all of humanity, and there are various things like setting up law courts to enforce these laws,
Yeah.
the prohibition against murder, prohibition against sexual immorality, prohibition against idol worship.
Yeah.
I forget the other few.
Not to eat flesh from
Yeah, not to
anything.
eat flesh from a live animal. And then there's another 606 commandments which are exclusively for Jewish people, and if you like, an extra set of responsibilities. So it's I guess, as Joe said, it's mainly focused on Jews, but there is a component which we believe is applicable, and the non-Jews will also be held. If we're talking here in terms of soteriology and afterlife and things like that, that non-Jews will also be held accountable for, according to where Jews will have to be held accountable for all of the commandments.
Yeah.
There's these 7 commandments which non-Jews will be held accountable for.
And going back to the idol worship, do you guys, what's your take on Christianity and Islam coming after Judaism? Do you feel like it's surplus to, I don't know?
So, one of the driving philosophies behind the Torah is to be a light unto the nations. What does that mean?
Yeah.
It means introduce the concept of monotheism to the world,
Yeah.
and the moral code that comes with that. Some would call it, it's been argued here, like some sort of innate morality that we all have within us. I don't necessarily subscribe to the 7 laws of Noah being actual concrete laws that other people have to abide by, because there's no real traces of it in other nations, but it's more that other societies should build moral, ethical societies.
So you're a guiding light to other societies?
So it's more than that. So when it comes back to Christianity and Islam, it's not a coincidence that they were born out of Judaism. The Quran quotes the Torah and the Talmud repeatedly. It mentions our prophets more than it mentions its own
As I was
prophet.
listening to your conversation, I was just like, there's so many similarities between Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Just as I was listening, I felt like I could...
And so my position on Islam and Christianity, they are an inevitable consequence of the Jewish idea of monotheism and being a light unto the nations. So while we don't go out and proselytize, the ethical code that is inherent within the Torah is then manifested through Islam, through Christianity, and I think both religions have done tremendous good in the world, and I'm sure there are people in those religions' names that have done incredible bad as well, but as a concept...
People are people, right?
Exactly.
Either you're good or you're bad, or no one's perfect. We can all aim to be good, we can all maybe take it down the other line as well. What about non-monotheistic religions?
So again, Judaism, so other religions, so we do have a concept of Olam Haba, the world to come, and other religions, they advocate that to go to heaven, you need to believe in Jesus. To go to Jannah, you need to accept the prophecy of Mohammad. Judaism doesn't make any such claim. It says, do righteous deeds, and you've got as much a shot at the world to come as a Jew does. It's about what you do in this world. So there will be pagans, idolaters that do incredible good in the world. And when I talk pagans, idolaters, I'm not talking the type that sacrifice their children and things like that in the past.
Not non-monotheistic.
Yeah, that's so that's what a pagan is. A pagan is a non-monotheist.
So you think Christianity and Islam is non-monotheistic?
No, I think they're monotheistic.
So
there's schools of thought within Christianity.
So if I can come in on this, so there's a very famous codifier of Jewish law called the Rambam in the Middle Ages. And when he spoke about Christianity and Islam, he said it's no coincidence. If you look at the history of religions, before the destruction of the Second Temple, all the religions are very much unlike Judaism. And he said if you look after the destruction of the Second Temple, all the religions that have come into the world since then, they're all based or derived from Judaism. And he said that, as Joe said, it's no coincidence. So we believe he said it's because there's certain concepts that the world needs to have, and these are a vehicle for sharing those ideas. Now, eventually, of course, if you're talking on a pure, like, epistemological level, then of course, like, I don't mean this in an offensive way, but just to tell you what our genuine, we believe, for example, we don't believe that Jesus was a special person. We don't believe, we're expecting a Messiah, we don't believe this is Jesus. We believe that for Muslims, that your religion is 100% monotheistic. So there's a rule. Jews are not, in general, are not forbidden even to enter a church. Because it's been
There is within Judaism diversity. So you have a rabbi called Rabbi Yaakov Emden. So on one school of Jewish thought, they say that Christianity is idolatrous because of the Trinity, which is the Islamic position as well. And the other school of thought says that actually, while there may be some confusion, it's still a monotheistic religion and we're still praying to the same God. So even within Judaism, there's diversity of thought as to how we approach Islam and how we approach Christianity. But the Jews are more of an inward-looking people.
So going back, so I think we agree that Christianity and Islam are both monotheistic religions, apart from what you just said about possibly the Messiah and how that's perceived, right? In Christianity. My question was, what about non-monotheistic religions?
And I just responded that Judaism teaches that. So here's the absurdity of some monotheistic religions. Yeah, if I go around and I murder and rape everybody that I see, and then in my dying days, I actually know. Tell you what, I was a big sinner. I believe in Jesus. Say a few Hail Marys, and then I go to heaven.
Sorry.
While as an idolater who every single day worships Krishna, whomever,
Right.
but spends their entire existence
Right.
helping orphans, widows, the oppressed, they go to the hellfire?
Right.
What sort of a system is that?
Except
Right. Okay, I just wanted you to expand outside
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Christianity and Islam.
So and that's the Jewish position. The Jewish position is do good deeds in this world, whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew, just be a decent person.
And also, even if you take something like, for example, like the Hindu religion.
Sorry.
Perhaps I wasn't quite following you.
Yeah.
before.
So if you take like, I think Hinduism is probably considered by a lot of people to be not to be a monotheistic religion. But if you actually look into, I studied Hindu philosophy, that there's a lot of ideas, or a lot of pointers within it, and they say they don't look at these. They look at these not as individual gods, but individual manifestations of God. So if you like, almost like an expanded Trinity. So,
Okay.
and we also have a tradition that the Eastern religions are based also on Judaism. It's based on a biblical verse.
I've heard that Brahma could be from Abraham.
Yeah. So we have a. It's interesting you say that because our tradition is that there's a line in Genesis. It says that Abraham, before he died, gave everything that he owned to Isaac, and then he sent gifts to the east. So they asked, what is it? If he's given everything to Isaac, how can he give gifts? He doesn't own anything. How can he give gifts to other people? So they say, what is the only thing that you can give away and still retain is spiritual wisdom. So he said that he sent messages to the east with spiritual ideas.
That's great. Thank you, I've learned a lot.
What's your
I
name?
appreciate your time. My name's Mohammad.
Mohammad,
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. What's your name?
Stephen.
Stephen, nice to meet you.
Can I go for it? You guys got
Tag in, tag
yeah.
out.
Oh, yeah.
You clip
right.
it, I'll put mine like that, and
We'll
then we'll
share.
probably catch most of it.
jumping on.
Oh, just a few.
Look, the flip screen comes right now though. You need to make sure he's looking good, looking sharp. Beard's trimmed, looking on point.
No, just a few, if you don't mind, a few random questions that came to mind. So you said Judaism is for one tribe that was in the desert.
Yeah.
Would that be the tribe of Judah?
No, that was the 12 tribes. So it's basically
So
the
it's
brothers.
the
Yeah,
12
all of it. One
okay,
family.
one family, the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah.
Are modern Jews descendant of the tribe of Judah?
No. So I'm descended from the tribe of Levi.
Levi, okay. How do you know that?
Because they had certain roles within the temple, so people appended them. Jews didn't have surnames.
Okay.
So, for example, like my grandfather's name, his Hebrew name,
Yeah.
is Zev Ben Yechiel Halevi.
Okay.
So he would append Halevi to his name, and then the son inherits that from the father.
And just so
I got it on my mother's side, so
Yeah,
I'm not actually,
okay.
I don't have that same role in the religion, but I know because generations, people couldn't just add on this name because it was considered, it's considered, it's just something that you wouldn't do.
And
Gershom told me that levy is what we use for the word when we tax. Levy a tax. He said it comes from that.
Yeah, because
surname.
so in part because basically when Joe was talking before about the 10 or 20% that Jews give to charity,
Yeah.
that's from the biblical commandment where you have to give between 10 and 20% to the to the priests and the Levites in the temple. And because the temple doesn't exist, we now give that portion of our income away
Like
to other
zakat
people.
from Muslims
Yeah,
or-
so exactly. So
You're basically standing next to royalty, basically.
It's an honour.
Biblical
It's
royalty.
an absolute honour for you. Do you know which tribe you
No.
would go back to?
No,
Okay.
so I've got a surname Cohen,
Okay.
but I'm not a Cohen. So basically, Cohen were a subdivision of the tribe of Levi, but they were the high priests. They were the creme de la creme, the royalty. And so when my family
You've
came
got the
from,
name, how do you
so
know
when my
you're not-
family came from Poland,
Yeah.
their name was originally Kurek, which means chicken farmer.
yeah, my wife, we verified.
Okay.
Which means chicken farmer. And when they came to the UK, because they were illiterate, they just got upgraded by immigration. So the story goes to Cohen. So we got an upgrade. So everyone thinks we're royalty, but actually we're like the lowest of the low. We're the
Okay.
chicken farmers.
All right. Well, no, it's,
No, but to answer your question, most Jews don't know their tribe
don't know,
anymore.
okay.
Different Jewish communities, like say in India and Ethiopia, will have
Yemen
legends, or Yemen will have legends of which tribes they descended from, but nothing we can verify. The only tribe
Some
we can
peop-
verify is Levi.
yeah.
And Cohen.
Okay.
So some people will have like a family history,
Yeah.
and they'll, going back hundreds of years that they've passed down. So they'll have a, but again, it's not verifiable. It's just a family account. They might even have a written record of it, or some people for example, in Yemen, they have it carved in wood.
In Yemen.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just to really add on to your original
Yeah.
point, which is like basic, so the question that comes up time and time again here is, how do you know that you're Jewish? It's just like, aren't you a little bit too white, Joseph, to be Jewish? Shouldn't you be a
okay.
black man? And basically, the Jews are the most genetically studied group of people because they basically were incredibly insular. Because they were basically confined to ghettos and they only really married amongst themselves, they've been subject to a lot of genetic studies. And whether you're an Ashkenazi Jew, which is a Jew who follows the customs that evolved in Western and Eastern Europe, if you are a Mizrahi Jew from the Arab world, basically you have shared genetic markers. So the majority of Jews belong to a haplotype that begins with J. E1B1B, which is 20% of Jews, fall into this haplotype, but we all basically trace our ancestry back to the Middle East. And so although we may look different, an Ethiopian Jew may look different to a Polish Jew, there are genetic markers which are similar because we come from the same source.
Yeah. I mean, if you watch these TV shows where they do people's ancestry, I think Margaret Thatcher's daughter was 20% African or something.
Yeah.
You could have heritage from somewhere and you might not look
Yeah.
phenotypically like...
So there's an amazing YouTube video you should watch, which is some black activist from America discovering that actually genetically she's white, and she's constructed her entire identity about black and white people oppressing black. And when she gets the news, she breaks down in tears, like being white is the worst thing ever. It's, so yeah, how you look doesn't necessarily determine what your either paternal or maternal line is.
It's a lineage thing, although people could convert to it. I understand it's a very arduous process. I don't know why I'm fixated on this tribe of Judah thing. I'm just wondering, why don't the Jewish people call themselves Israelites if you are all from the 12 tribes?
So basically, the word Jew is a derivative of the Hebrew Yehuda, which is the tribe of Judah.
Judah, yeah.
So, and because basically what happened in history with this, there was the land of Israel in ancient times that was the 12 tribes, and part of that is split into two kingdoms. It's split into the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah.
Yeah.
And the kingdom of Israel, which was the 10 tribes, was conquered by the Assyrians, I think, in the 8th century BC, something like that.
Okay.
And those people were carted off and dispersed amongst the Assyrian empire at the time.
Do we know where their
And so
descendants are?
so there's people. So for example, there's tribes in Afghanistan who have a tribal history that they were originally. Now they're Muslims, but they were originally Jews.
Okay. I think you have the Pashtuns, right? The Pashtuns.
But Pashtuns
regard themselves as Bani Israel.
There's a tribe in that occupies Malawi and South Africa called the Lemba, and they have again a tribal history that they're descended from Jews, and they have also talking about the genetics of it. Some of them have because the Kohanim are all descended, the priesthood, they're all descended from Aaron. the brother of Moses. They all have this. There's a gene that's exclusive to the Kohanim.
Well, a lot of people like to make these claims, and who knows how true they are. I'm sure Raspect has told you that he's more Jewish than you, or he's an Israelite.
Who is he? I don't know.
It's a Rastafarian.
Raspect is a very opiniopinated.
I mean, I'd say that tongue in cheek. I get on well with Raspect, and I find it interesting that the Caribbeans, the Black Caribbean people, want to identify with this Jewish story and maybe years being enslaved. So probably rings a bell.
It's just another manifestation of anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism rears its head in many ways. The Nazis was physical violence. They erased us physically. They tried to exterminate us. With others, it's an intellectual exercise, and they tried to erase us as even being Jews. So actually, as a people, I'm not a Jew. I cease to be a Jew. I'm a white European imposter.
Do all Rastafarians say? Are they saying
no?
We're
This
also
is
Jews? Or are they saying you're not Jews as we are?
It's born more out of the Nation of Islam and the Hebrew Israelites in America who are Christians, and the Hebrew Israelites, or the Black Hebrews, they believe that the Hispanics, the Puerto Ricans, all these different categories are the lost tribes. And so included
there was British Israelism, where people say the British people are lost tribes. Maybe they are.
In fairness, in Latin America, there is a large number of people who are descended from Jews who escaped the Spanish Inquisition.
That's another thing that Gershon mentioned to me. He said that as a person of Irish heritage, there's a good chance that I have some Hebrew DNA from Jewish people that fled Andalusia and escaped to Ireland. There's people on the Hebride Islands that say the Hebrides means Hebrew. Everyone seems to want to claim it. I hope it doesn't. It seems to upset you. And if they're claiming it at the expense of Jewish people, then fair enough.
So the reality is we have a hugely rich archaeological record, a literature record. Like wherever Jews have lived, there is a presence, be it a Jewish graveyard, a synagogue, a mikveh. There are books, there are letters. There's like the Cairo Geniza, where we have letters that were preserved being sent from Jewish communities around the world, and we're their descendants. Okay. Now all these other people that come along and say, actually, we're the real Jews, guys, there is no archaeological record, there is no literature record. In some cases there are, in those cases they're taken very seriously.
And you're open-minded about the Afghanistan one.
Yeah, in some cases there's. Okay, I'll give you an example. I have a friend from Spain. I used to live in Israel, and I met her in Israel.
Not strictly in the park.
She
probably is.
We shouldn't be filming either, but
she told me.
Should we not?
Apparently not, but I'll talk about that.
No, and she told me that her grandmother, literally on her deathbed, called her and her mother over. Said, "Oh, by the way, we're Jews."
By the way, yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about where Jews had to live in secret.
Yeah, you know, there's a village in Portugal that came out of. About a decade ago, or 15 years ago. Yeah. And they announced in northern Portugal, this entire village said, we are actually, we've been for the last 450 years, we've been pretending to be Catholics. Actually, we're Jews hiding from the Inquisition, and now we feel safe. So there are going to be some people who come along, but again, that's the difference. They're not saying we're the real Jews and you're not. There's the people who say we're the real Jews and you're not, and then there's people that say that we're also Jews.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I think the thing is, if you go to Israel, Jews come in all shapes and colours. You go to any synagogue in North London, you'll see Jews of different colours. I go to a synagogue where I'm the lightest person there. Yeah. There's huge diversity amongst the Jewish people. It's not a racial thing.
I go to synagogue where I'm the darkest person
there. Definitely the most ginger in most places I go.
That's got to be tough. All right.
You've got a little bit of colour in your beard.
Well, what do you guys? Last question then, I think. The Jews are a people, they're not a race, they're not a religion, they're a people. I've heard you describe them as such. Can you give me an example of another similar people? Or are they unique in the fact that they're a religion and
I would say if you look at Native American, I'm not an expert on this, but Native American culture, they are both an ethnicity and a religion, and you can't just join the tribe has to accept you into it.
It's a tribal, cultural affiliation.
And the Mormons think that the Native Americans are the lost tribe of Israel, I think.
Do they?
Do they?
Sorry, that's right.
It's probably because they're so Sunni.
Okay.
We'll wrap it up. Anything that you want to add to that?
It's a completely separate subject.
Okay.
I'm very interested in you as an individual.
Okay.
Get profile.
We're filming the camera on you now.
Okay, all right. Oh,
on your own channel.
Battery's getting low now. All right, the heat's on me now. Go on, have to be fair. Yeah.
You've spent time in Palestine.
Yes.
You would describe yourself definitely as pro-Palestinian. Maybe historically describe yourself as anti-Zionist.
Yes.
Maybe that's something you've reflected on.
I've been reflecting on that.
My question for you, and it's a question I like asking every pro-Palestinian activist, you chose this conflict over far bigger conflicts, far longer conflicts, far more brutal conflicts. Like, I could ask you questions on Somalia, Sudan. I would imagine, maybe you do, because it's only based on history speaking to other people, you know very little about these conflicts. So why did you pick on the Israel-Palestine conflict over all why did you choose to focus on this one over all of the others? Because I've seen you walking around with a kafir, which is a sign of Palestinian resistance, but I haven't seen you walking around with any Sudanese or Central African Republic or Eritrean Tibet, yeah. And so I don't mean to put it's just it's something I like the word, because I want to understand why the world is obsessed on us.
Cool. Firstly, it's a personal thing. And I had family who spent time in the Middle East, mum and dad, who saw what was happening there as an injustice, and you have to you take from your parents.
Do you come from a left-wing household?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Yes, I do. Left-wing.
So where in the Middle East were they?
In Israel, Palestine.
Okay.
On a kibbutz.
Okay.
Yeah, my family
kibbutz?
was. I couldn't tell you.
What are their names? Date of birth?
In the 70s, before I was born. You know what, let me reset the camera. Yes. In case we run, it'll be a separate video.
Okay.
So Josie's asking me why I chose Palestine over the many causes of liberation throughout the world, and I was saying that I'm from a left-wing family. My parents spent time in Israel in the 70s before I was born.
This is your one.
On a kibbutz, which is perhaps the only place in the world where true communism has ever succeeded, where everyone does share everything equally. Sounds like maybe you disagree.
I lived on a kibbutz.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I think it's just a series of personal fiefdoms.
Okay, there you go.
My opinion.
Well,
says the man who refuses to debate on
come and have a
camera.
chat, man.
He
Come
likes
and have
to
a chat.
heckle, but not on camera. Sign of an intellectual powerhouse. Sorry.
The
That's
last
right.
part wasn't
Yeah.
necessary, but you already had him at the start.
Take it too far.
My parents are left wing. The left wing often support Palestine. It's seen as a David and Goliath situation, which I think, in terms of power, it certainly is. Israel is much more.
But do you not agree that I mean the Palestinians historically maybe there's a degree of lip service from the leadership, but they do have the might of the Arab world, and the Arab world does have considerable political clout, which backs the Palestinians certainly in international fora, and also financially in terms of funding.
As you said, pays lip service.
I mean, I agree there's a large element of his lip service, but there's also a large element of it is funding.
Every time Israel's been invaded, it's been by Arab armies, not by the Palestinians. I agree, are not a powerful force.
Yeah.
They never have been. They've always been used by far more powerful Arab nations, who had ambitions for the land. But I think rather than going into Israel, Palestine, I think it's more interesting on you. So you're saying you come from a left-wing household, and so this was a conflict that they focused on, and this is something that I've experienced. If you are on the left, I would describe it as almost there's I don't know how many, let's say 10 commandments or the 5 commandments of the left. One, you have to be pro-Palestinian. You have to be pro-choice. You have to be for gay rights. You have to be for the redistribution of wealth. That fact is in there somewhere, but much lower down the pecking order. You have to be, if you're in America, you have to be for gun control. There's certain ideas, and for me, what's really confusing, I can understand why some of those made their way as being a character trait of being on the left. What I find very perplexing is why Israel-Palestine finds itself there. Because as you described, Israel in its infancy was a socialist enterprise. It was founded by socialists. Some of the most successful manifestations of communism took place in Israel. Yet at some point, the left moved away from Israel. Now, I have my theories, but what I'm really interested in is from your perspective, your parents stayed in Israel, and yet still they raised you in an environment where you, or they as well, became hostile to Israel. So what happened?
Well, my dad said that he saw mistreatment of Arab people in Israel, and having gone to the kibbutz, hoping to find a place, sanctuary, where everyone was treated equal, thought that the Arabs in that region weren't being treated equal in the Jewish state. I mean, that's anecdotal evidence, that's what he saw, and I think a lot of the Palestinian supporters will often pick on what happens to Arab Israeli citizens, but there's racism in every country, and that's not going to be solved. My issue is the occupation. We can go into that if you want to probably take a long time, but there's a occupation there that international law disagrees with.
I'd take it with that.
Just before we go there, what's your position on Cyprus and Tibet?
I think Cyprus was illegally invaded by the Turkish people, and I would be with the Greek Cypriots. Long story short.
What about Crimea? As an interesting thing, there's an area that's historically part of Russia, which essentially was signed over. I don't know if you know the history of Crimea. It was
Pavlov and I spoke about it at one point. Yeah, it was signed over to Ukraine and then it went back to being part of Russia.
Well, no, it was signed. Well, it's gone back to being part of Russia because the Russians invaded
annexed it.
But
a democratic vote took place, right?
It was signed over by Khrushchev, who was Ukrainian, on the 50th anniversary of the Soviet Union, when he was basically drunk. Celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Soviet Union, and he signed a decree portioning it to Ukraine. So there's, so I just wonder how you would look at that.
I look at that as the people of Crimea voting to rejoin Russia, like the people of Scotland could have voted to be independent had they wanted to.
So the main focus of the...
You can do them all.
No, my main
15-minute max. Okay, one second.
Mohammad, nice to meet you.
Okay.
Jazakallahu khairan.
Good to see you. Yeah, go on, sorry.
And so my main focus is more, there are brutal occupations around the world. There is entire, like Tibet nobody talks about, but the Han people are now, I think, the biggest demographic within there. Nobody...
Can I introduce a point?
Yeah.
Possibly just to do partially with the publication, how do you say it? Oh, it's gone out of my mind now. It's very well known, this conflict. Wow, information about Tibet is not very well known.
And public awareness.
That's it, thanks.
Perfect. And why?
Well,
why is this one well known? That's the point. That's what I'm trying to get down. Why did his
power plays behind the scenes, most likely.
So power plays. Okay, so let's explore the power plays, yeah?
Sure.
So Israel, in its infancy, wasn't a powerful state. I'm sure we all agree with that. It was survivors of the Holocaust and survivors of Arab expulsion of Jews. So we're not talking to powerful people in its infancy compared to the entire might of the Arab world. So today, when you talk about power plays, who are you talking about? Because it can't be about historical, it has to be about the present then.
Well, and presumably. I mean, I suggested it as an idea, not necessarily my idea.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
One thing
I've thought about it.
One thing I find interesting is that if you look at the, you can disagree over the rights and wrongs and the legal aspects, but I think if you actually look in terms of human rights abuses, I think if you're reasonably objective, that aside from the question of sovereignty, which are kind of quite abstract discussions, that if you look at the scale of human rights abuses, Israel's quite low down on the list.
Is this whataboutery though?
No, it's not what. No,
the fact that people steal cars doesn't mean I should.
What about?
I'm not saying it's whataboutery. I'm saying that what I find interesting is that because of that, if you look, for example, the death toll in the conflict in over 100 years is I think it's around about 70,000 on both sides, which basically in terms of international conflicts is obviously not saying that that's not.
What's the ratio?
But forget the ratios. I don't think the ratios are important because
you brought it up.
No, I didn't. I'm not bringing up.
He's bringing up the death toll in total.
Yeah, the total death toll of both sides. So that's including Israelis and Arabs. So
if you want to talk death tolls, how many Americans and Britons died in the Iraq War? Like that's a real death toll. That's a real proportion. Yeah. But you're not. But people. Yeah.
But
So
that's not my point. So my point is that if you look at the kind of the scale of human rights in China, I find it very interesting that it's quite easy for people to build a coalition that wants to boycott Israel on a kind of arcane political point about who should have sovereignty in a particular area. But actually, if you look at the day-to-day lives, and I've lived there, and I've worked with Arabs, and the ones that I've met, that most of them agree that they'd actually had it better under Israeli rule.
This is in Israel.
This is in Israel.
And that's why I make the distinction between Israel proper and
I'm
what's
talking about
happening
in the West Bank it's the same.
No, I'm talking about Arab. I worked in construction, so Arab labourers that were coming from the West Bank. Coming from the West Bank to work in Israel, and they almost universally agreed that first of all they hate Abu Mazen because he's so corrupt, and secondly they say that actually life was, they couldn't say it at home, but they said life is better under the Israeli rule.
Then why not just extend Israeli rule to the whole of the region that Israel controls?
Because that would then make them Israeli.
Yeah.
And that's
Israeli
not what
Arabs.
people who advocate for the Palestinians want.
Well,
Hey, he wants that.
I
wants
support
that.
that. I support one
okay.
state.
One state.
So my position is that historically Palestine, mandatory Palestine was what's now Israel and Jordan, and I think if the Palestinians, there's already one Arab state that's been created from the mandate of Palestine, and that's called Jordan, and I think there's no need for a third state. Also, and the other reason that I have an objection is I think that if you actually look at the type of state that's likely to come into existence, it's likely to be some kind of dictatorship. It's likely to be fairly repressive, to be anti-gay rights, anti-women's rights, and I think that I find it hard to believe why people would advocate for the creation of that kind of society. I know
that's what you envisage a Palestinian state might be like.
I mean, if you look in Gaza, that's exactly what Palestine. If the only reason Abu Mazen is still in power is because Israel controls the West Bank. If Israel was not in control of the West Bank, Hamas would take over within probably a week, maximum 2 weeks, and that's considered common knowledge amongst people with a security background.
And just to add into that, the last elections you had amongst the Palestinians was 12 years ago. So this links back to my original point, which I was trying to make.
12 years ago, but that's more recent than in most Arab countries.
And this all links back to my.
It was the only, I think, legitimate, free, and fair election in any Arab country.
So I'm going to put forward a theory as to why your parents became anti-Israel from being pro-Israel, and it's to do with how the left views the world. They view it through a power matrix. You're either an oppressor
David or Goliath.
or an oppressor. You're either David or Goliath. Great enough. And what happened, it's not around values. It's no longer about this group of people. They have a similar value set to us. Within this society, there's equality. Within this society, there's a higher standard of living. It becomes down to literally, are you an oppressed or are you an oppressor? So coming out of the Holocaust, the left had huge sympathy for the Jewish people. And so Israel was seen positively by most people on the left. But what happened was Israel defeated the Arab invaders in 48. 8 Arab armies attacked Israel. Israel repelled them and survived. 67, a similar story happened. Israel survived. 73. And so literally, Israel kept winning these wars, and suddenly this downtrodden Holocaust became powerful and became the oppressor, and the left switched. And suddenly, we became the bad guys. Now, what's the danger of that? The danger is exactly what we're now seeing manifest in left-wing circles. You will see on a pro-Palestinian march or on an anti-cuts demonstration, you will see an Islamist who believes that gay people should be thrown off roofs, marching side by side in solidarity with
I've seen it.
With an LGBT activist.
I've seen it, and it's crazy.
And it's because we've moved, and it's because we've moved away from associating with people who have similar values or values that we'd like to see shared, distributed throughout the world. And instead, it focuses on this weird dynamic, which are you oppressed on? Because the danger of that theory is nobody is going to be oppressed forever. And if you advocate for the oppressed person to rise above their oppressor, they will do, And when they do that, you'll then reject them and spit them out, which is what happened to the Jewish people, in my opinion.
Well, you're a white male, so we can't listen to you.
I don't know why we're even allowed to talk.
Excuse me. Why do you assume that he's male?
Well,
Did you just assume my gender?
He could identify
we're going to get
as a woman.
complaints from all
Could identify as a
angles.
tree.
It's a strange world, and I think the points you make about Islamists being on the same side as others is very, very strong. I look back on the time when my parents were in that region. It was Arab nationalism was a secular, non-religious phenomenon, and the Palestinians have lost that to their cost. I think, to the cost, to the detriment of the region.
Well, I will just add one thing. In my experience, the overwhelming majority of Palestinians that I meet, I get on fine with. They want peace. The majority of settlers I meet, I get on fine with. They want peace. And I think the biggest issue is the entire West. The Muslim world is a problem. The Jewish world is a problem. America, Britain, Europe, the Arab world were all problems. Why? Because we all focus and make Israel and Palestine our cause. We make it our issue, and that's why it remains in the spotlight.
It should be for the people of that region to decide.
I think they find peace if it was left to them.
Well said, well said. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I'd just like to congratulate you. This would be good for your YouTube channel for being a calm and open-minded person that's willing to have a rational discussion, because it's very unusual in this day.
For real.
Thank you very much, and thank you
I
to the
agree with
audience.
that. I agree.
Nice one, gentlemen. Thank you. And see you.
That's his content.
Content over everything. From now to Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen.
Chicago is the mega capital of America. Under Obama, Chicago inherited the name Iraq, which means Chicago, Iraq, because they kill more people there than Iraq. Do you hear that now under Obama? Because Obama